What's up, everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of the 5280 Podcast on the MHRT Network. I'm your host, as always, Mundungus Creevy, alongside my co-host Glenn Hauser and Cameron Parker Pooh. And again, we're missing another one of our members, Mr. Gage. My titties are out in Madrid. There's that context thing again. It's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot to go over today. But first things first, how are you guys doing?
Doing well, man. Cut down day. It was a lot of anticipation leading up to today, and didn't disappoint.
One of the hardest and kind of exciting days, being a fan, is cut down day. And it's obviously, hard from the coach's perspective, the front office's perspective, because you just wish you could keep every one of these guys. But, admittedly, the Broncos, they had hard decisions. And I will say that, I feel like every single year we kind of say that they always have hard decisions, but specifically the defensive side of the ball, they had a lot of hard decisions to make. So they were able to cut down to the 53, and but it's a lot of fun. I mean, obviously, it's good to be back. I like the fact that, maybe Gage and I, subtly planned this. I missed last week, and then, he missed this one. So maybe we kind of subtly planned that.
Maybe. And if somebody comes up to either one of you two and is like, this is your new name, that's my bad. I'm sorry. I apologize for Mr. Cameron Hawktua Parker. But it's fine. But there is a lot to get to. And again, it's fun for us because it gives us something to talk about. Not so fun for them. Because we had to cut down 40 today, 30.
Well, it goes from 90.
Well, I don't think there was any cuts really until yesterday, today.
Right.
Yeah.
So they had to go from 90 to 53 with the ability to sign 16 plus the international player. So, to the practice squad. So you technically can have 70 of these guys of these 90, but you're still saying goodbye to certain players that you have an affinity for. I mean, the biggest is, one of the most largest fan favorites of recent memory with Tim Patrick. At least we got word not too long ago that he did sign with the Detroit Lions practice squad. So he's going to get an opportunity there with a very, very good team, with an excellent quarterback and a great offense there. So hoping he makes the 53. I can't imagine they're not going to have him on there. And would love to see Tim make the playoffs. That would be spectacular for him. Yeah,
and you peel back the layer, and that's one of the biggest talking points that for any Bronco podcast that was discussed, and that was how many wide receivers are they going to keep? And they threw 6 out the window, at least initially. They threw 6 out the window. They threw 7 out the window. They're rolling with 5. At least initially, and I didn't have 5. I'm sure you guys didn't. I didn't have 5, on my radar. But I think it's pretty evident, that they're going with the youth movement. As much as Cortland Sutton is there and Josh Reynolds is there, they're going a little bit with that youth movement. But I think I mentioned to the extent of if it stays with 5 wide receivers, the speculation about Troy Franklin getting a redshirt year may have been, misstated, if you will. He's not going to be redshirting, if they're going to be rolling with 5 wide receivers.
Jeff, you got so young.
It's Benjamin Button over here.
So I did want to cover one thing first before we get into the roster cuts, because obviously that's going to be the big thing.
Mm-hmm.
But it was put out on Mike Kliss's Twitter page the other day that it has officially been 2 years since the Walter Penner Group bought the Broncos for $4.65 billion. And in that 2 years, we've had stadium upgrades, new headquarters, fired Hackett, hired Peyton, cut Russ, new uniforms. What's next? We know that they're redoing all the practice facility stuff. Then what?
Yeah.
I mean, the logical talking point is, of course, stadium, right? I mean, that's the that's that. Well, I mean, as far as talking point, that's like the next talking point. Is,
Well, and I've heard that they're thinking about building it right next to Cam's house, so he doesn't have to really travel anywhere.
that's. I mean, I'm biased. I'm a huge fan. It's going to help
Straight
out.
from Rob Walton. That's exactly where I heard that from.
Yep.
They're going to build it in Cherry Hills Village. I mean, whatever. Cam, good for you.
Cam's backyard. He could just jump off the porch into the stadium.
Yeah, and what they'll do is they'll do like a a foldable stadium, where you can actually, to where they'll use the Hank Pym technology. They'll shrink the stadium and they'll just kind of move it to each and every, Denver or Colorado City, so that each in Colorado City can get a chance to experience Denver Bronco games every Sunday. I think that would be really cool.
It's like
if they have a foldable
it's like Transformers when Bumblebee touches the cube and it just folds down into itself.
Right.
Well, if they have a foldable stadium, you're guaranteed at least one scoregami a year.
It's true.
Oh,
But if you think about only 2 years and they've made such massive upgrades. I mean, and even when you start dialing down to the fact that they were replacing the field, essentially just because it was not in great shape, but just these, which is still massive amounts of money. Not necessarily to this ownership group, but it's still a big investment, and their attention to detail just continues to show. I mean, we're forgetting about the giant video board at Mile High now, and all the upgrades, and they just continue to roll things out while that new stadium is still being discussed behind the scenes.
One thing that's not listed there that was added this year was in that survey that they did where they took the poll and all 32 teams that they made a change for was accommodating the families and friends of of the players, and they did that this year. I think that came out, what was it, either for the Packers game or the Cardinals game of recent. But yeah, it came out that they've really made accommodations for the families and friends of either the road or even the home team. So they've really done a really good job of accommodating that, which we know that was across the board a big deal for for basically all 32 teams. Yeah,
and the Broncos are also going to follow suit with Deion Sanders. And if anybody from CBS or the Denver Post is mean, they're going to be like, no, you can't even come into the room anymore. You were mean, and I don't like it, and you stay out.
They got they got eyes on you, James Merrillat.
He said mean, not irrelevant.
James Merrillat was on an episode of something one of the other days and was talking about why he was so upset that the Broncos got rid of Russell Wilson, because he's one of the greatest quarterbacks they've ever had. And I was floored.
Yeah. I don't even see his stuff anymore. I don't know what happened there.
It's okay to admit that you blocked him, Glenn. It's okay.
Dreamweaver, could there be a trade coming in the running back room with the Watson roster spot being given? Meaning they're going to trade Watson?
No, I think the suggestion would be trading
or Williams,
Javonte. I mean, I don't think anything's going to happen as far as the top three guys in the running back room. I mean, Watson may end up getting bounced. I mean, we're going to be talking about the roster cuts, but quite honestly, the next 24 hours with waiver claims and practice squad movement, it's going to be one of those things where it is going to be a fluid roster, for essentially the rest of the week. But you got to hand it to Nate Atkins, that guy who's one of our favorites here on the show. He allowed the Broncos his versatility as a tight end and a fullback, and I think he could jump on the offensive line with his offensive line background as a coach for a dad. I mean, he allowed the Broncos to cut Burton and essentially free up a spot, because this guy can play two positions and only take up one roster spot. And so Blake Watson should have him on the Christmas card list for this year for certain.
But it's also worth mentioning, it sounds like things are trending in the direction of Michael Burton coming back. that he'll be on the practice squad, which I probably assume he'll probably be activated at some point. But still, the versatility is there with Atkins to where, and the other area and the other, talking point, to what you were mentioning, Glenn, is with that versatility is it's going to allow the Broncos, a blocking tight end along with Troutman, so that they can be able to use guys like the best player on the team, Lucas Kroll, Greg Dulcich. So they're at least
first ballot Hall of Famer.
Ballot Hall of Fame. They don't even need to put in a ballot. He's just in.
So they're at least able to use their tight end room, and specifically Greg Dulcich. Obviously we've been mentioning it. The early returns have been so good for him, and so now they can be able to use him in space. And Atkins really fills that to where they can be able to use him as an extra blocker or an extra tight end. So maybe initially, if they don't add Burden, it's at least exciting because maybe they're looking at the idea of 2 tight end sets, instead of a fullback, and that's pretty exciting because one of the things that obviously been a huge deal with Dulcich or anything really is tipping your hand one way or another for what it is that they may be doing. So I think that's a great feeling now, knowing the fact that at least Atkins is on that roster.
No, I did want to give a shout out to D-Rock because I have not seen someone type out Rapscallion in a long time. So nice on that one. Noah Bryan, a.k.a. Jeff Rapscallion, wants to know if there were any surprises today because he's out of the loop besides P. Ryan and TP. There were a couple, and we will get into that right now. So we got everything broken down here for us. So obviously, like the rumors were saying, the Broncos are sticking with 3 quarterbacks: Nix, Stidham, Wilson. I still think that Wilson's going to be the backup.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see. Obviously we said on the cuff, there's probably going to be a lot of changes from now till week 1. He's just trolling.
I was joking. Yeah, he's joking.
Thank the Lord. I was going to start throwing a cowbell I got over here.
Well, we need more of that.
We need more cowbell. Okay, hold on.
Oh, he's pulling out the cowbell, isn't he? He's actually pulling out a cowbell. So I think with the quarterback position,
don't fear the reaper.
right? So I just think with the quarterback position, it's gonna be interesting to see how it all shakes out. In what is it, the couple of weeks before.
Where else are you gonna get cowbell on a podcast?
You gotta pull the T-shirt up a little bit, got the belly exposed. Fellas, we need more cowbell.
People out in the lobby are freaking out right now. What is going on?
So what I was going to say with the quarterback position is, I think with at least a couple weeks, I'd be curious to know what will change with that, right? So that's going to at least give the Broncos and other teams, maybe some idea to, communicate something via trade. And, there was a lot of speculation. There was a lot of speculation, of course, about, do they want to trade Zach Wilson? Do they want to trade Jarrett Stidham? And I'm sure the next talking point, for us is going to end up being those comments that were made by Mr. Jarrett Stidham and, of course, Zach Wilson.
I mean, bona fide NFL starter, Jarrett Stidham.
Yeah.
How about trade him to the Vikings and bring Danucci back?
Actually, they cut Danucci. Oh, that's right. Yeah, they could probably still because they cut him. Yeah.
Well, the Bills cut him.
Yeah, the Bills cut him. Yeah.
So he could be our third stringer.
Hey, listen, Sam Hartman's available. I'm just throwing that out there.
Mike's boy toy. I mean,
just throwing that out there. I have a man crush, and I'm not afraid to admit it.
Just before I joined the stream, he was actually creating a song about Sam Hartman.
Yeah, I had the guitar out and everything.
Yeah. But I just I think that for Stidham,
that right there.
Let's send those book clubs into a tizzy. Let's.
So I just think that for Stidham, it was just at first I was like, I understand, where you're coming from, you know, and I get the human element to it. Like it was, and like I get the perspective. You know what I mean? Like I get the perspective. The problem was the question wasn't centered around you. You know, the question was centered on Bo Nix. It was asked, what do you feel about Bo Nix being named the starter? And you flipped that answer, or should I say that question, onto yourself by answering that just because you wanted to vent about how you aren't a NFL starter yet in the National Football League at like 27, 28 years old. So it's just like it completely looks bad when you do it that way. And vice versa to Zach Wilson, who rumors were abound about him being a bad teammate, you know, with the New York Jets, says, absolutely, I'm so happy for Nix. You know, I mean, I think the sky's the limit for that kid. And, you know, I'm really looking forward to seeing what he can be able to do. So Zach, a.k.a. bad teammate probably, and with the Jets, handled that exceptionally well, exactly how a 28-year-old vet should have done it. And Jarrett Stidham handled it exactly the way that Zach Wilson had been handling it probably with the New York Jets.
Yeah, as it turns out, it's the front office and the coaching staff that are horrible in New York. So both sides,
Zach Wilson,
matter.
yeah,
Jets or Giants.
If Zach Wilson gets the number 2 position, it'll probably be his happiest day of the year aside from Mother's Day. So like you know,
I don't know where to go with that.
But
That's all I got.
But the point is though is that the 3 quarterbacks, us keeping 3 quarterbacks, wasn't really all that surprised.
No, and then
Peyton really said that was.
You kind of bump it down into running backs. I don't think there's really that much of a surprise. You knew Williams, you knew McLaughlin, you knew Estime. I still liked Beatty over Watson, but you could go either way.
Yeah, and it sounds like I was gonna say it sounds like they want to bring him back once again on the practice squad.
Yeah, Beatty, he did have some negative plays in the game the other day, and I was wondering if that was going to affect him at all. Perhaps it did, but I can see him sticking around on the practice squad. That's where it would. One of the things I miss about Gage being on tonight is he would really kind of narrow the practice squad down as far as like how many slots for each position group he thought was going to be on there.
Yeah,
I know. Wide receiver he had as 3, and that does make sense. So after we go through this list, we should talk about some of the guys that we expect to be brought back.
Yeah. And we'll kind of jump around here as comments come in. Dreamweaver wants to know if Jones isn't ready week 1, who's starting free safety with Locke? Jones played in that last game, right? In the 3rd preseason game?
He did.
So let's say he's not ready. I'm assuming it would be J.L. Skinner.
No, I think it might.
I
think it might be Devon Key,
not Keydron Smith.
See, I was going to guess Keydron Smith. I mean, this guy is a turnover machine or ball hawk for sure.
I wouldn't be surprised. I think that of all the early returns that we've seen roster wise, I was pleasantly surprised by that safety unit, and it was specifically the play of Devon Key and Keydron Smith. I mean, Keydron Smith had been a turnover machine ever since that Colts game. And I mean, he created turnovers in what was it? Basically every single preseason game.
Yep.
Just give him a new number now. Like that's kind of what it is now. I mean, you know, the 43 aside from, you know, creating a lot of memories for us, you know, and TJ Ward, he played himself on a roster spot. And he wasn't just the only person, you know, that played himself onto a roster. There were a couple others, but I mean, the safety room in general, with the amount that they were keeping, because a lot of talk was 4 that they were going to be keeping, but Keydron made it really difficult to keep him off of there.
Yeah. So let's just bump it down to, tight ends. There's really no surprises. Nate Adkins replaces Burton, so he can do tight end or fullback. So that's all well and good. But then there's the wide receivers, and this one was a little surprising on 2, at least for me, on 2 things. One, Timmy P is now on the Lions, which sucks. But they also aren't carrying little Jordan Humphrey. And I thought that he had done enough to at least make the roster and have him carry 6.
Brandon Johnson made a great case for himself in that last game. So, I mean, that was our group chat was on fire with the whole Tim Patrick stuff yesterday, and we were just and trying to guess who the 6th receiver was going to be,
right.
Not considering that there would only be 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I think that just to look at it just from the Tim Patrick side, I think what made it hard on the Tim Patrick side is you look at some of the players stylistically, they kind of line up. They kind of line up a little bit with who Patrick was, and they're younger and healthier.
Special team play.
So guys like Devon Vele, Josh Reynolds, even maybe Cortland Sutton to a certain extent, like they're guys who can have roughly the exact same skill set to a degree of what, Tim Patrick, really brought. And I think that one thing I will say that I think maybe an area where I think the Broncos did right by Tim is that maybe they were keeping, I'm assuming, and I should say this under the assumption, I'm assuming they were keeping him in the know, and they were allowing him the chance to go sign with a contender, a team like the Detroit Lions, and thus, be snatched up, for that practice squad and, get a chance to learn their playbook and then, possibly be their wide receiver 3. But I'm still excited about the wide receiver room. I don't think it's going to stay at 5, but if it does, as I tweeted earlier, when this was being broken down, if it stays at 5, Troy Franklin's not getting a redshirt year. He is not getting a redshirt year.
Yeah. Well, and I think
so. The Lions were last year number 2 in passing, number 5th in the league in scoring. So he has found himself a very good spot.
Well, yeah, they're basically replacing Josh Reynolds with Tim Patrick.
Right.
Essentially,
so it makes sense. But I don't think it was Josh Reynolds that made it so Timmy P wouldn't be here. I think it was Devon Vele.
It was a multitude of.
And I'm not blaming him. I'm just saying, how well he played and his skill set made Tim Patrick able to be let go.
I think the new kickoff rule also played a major part where Tim does not play any special teams. So now you have to really have these other guys that can not only play either straight offense or straight defense, but also be on these special teams units. And that wasn't an option. And when you're really trying to, looking at the quarterbacks and having 3 quarterbacks on the active roster, the 53, we haven't seen that for the Broncos in quite some time. So that took it from somewhere, having non-offensive linemen, as opposed to a potential 8. That there's another spot. If you look at the linebackers, and we'll get to those, but there's only 4 outside and 4 inside presently. And, so there's not a lot of excess in some of these positions. And it's tough, but we'll see a lot of these guys come back, and there's going to be a lot of shifting. Just to give you an idea, Cliff's put out a tweet that said, give me a second. I'm sorry. He said, Broncos will start building practice squad at 10 a.m. Wednesday, practice pushed to 1:15 to get them in. Vets Humphrey and Burton should be on it. George Payton said, there are a couple of vets on the practice squad who will likely be active week 1. You probably know who they are. So, that screams, to me, that screams Burton, and that does scream Little Jordan if he does go back.
Still the best name ever. Moose River Hummer. Still the best name ever.
Best nickname.
Not sure he's feeling the 53-man roster. I can get that. So Sports Nonsense and Jeff are talking about the money saving on Tim Patrick. I thought it was only $1 million.
I think it's 1 to 2 or something like that. I think the money that they saved was from P. Ryan.
Yeah.
But with Tim Patrick, that's the other example of with Patrick and Pirine, they found themselves in really uncomfortable situations, and it was like it sucked because it had nothing to do with their talent, it had nothing to do with who they are. The Broncos just felt like it was a need for them to go to a little bit of some younger players, and so they kind of fell victim to a bit of a crowded room, if you will. So it's just a tough business. It's bittersweet, to see him go, but yeah, both of them.
Well,
but
and we shouldn't need Pirine to bail us out on 4th and 7 anymore, so it's fine.
In the 2-minute drill.
Yeah, so it's all good. Okay, moving into offensive line. I don't think there's many surprises, although Frank Crum surprised me a little bit because he was getting worked the whole preseason.
I will say this. I was surprised by the amount of tackles that are on the, for the offensive line. I mean, obviously carrying 9 is a lot. But, you're talking about just in terms of overall tackles, you're talking about Garrett Bowles, you're talking about Mike McGlinchey, you're talking about Alex Pavlovsky, Matt Peart, and Frank Crum. Yeah. Like, that's a lot of tackles. And so maybe one of the thinking, some of the thinking that was alongside with that was, that extra blocker, right? Reporting eligible, right? It was a big to do, of course, with the Detroit Lions, but like having that extra, lineman that can, maybe be, a tight end, right? Right. So I think that, Frank Crum maybe being one of the more athletic options for them, I think maybe at least gives him that. But if it was my preference, I would have rather had stashed Crum on the practice squad, let him develop a little bit, and really kind of prove to, be something in year 2.
Well, was it Palczewski or Peart and Crum that were able to move inside and play guard? Is that Palczewski and Crum?
Crum is 6'7", so I don't think he was playing inside.
Yeah. You sure not thinking about like Forsyth or something? Because I know Forsyth played guard.
He did.
Might have been. But I thought it was a tackle that could move in. Maybe they cut him. I don't know.
It could have been Quinn Bailey too, because
I think that was it.
Because Quinn Bailey was the guy who could do both tackle and guard.
Defensive line, really no shockers there except for Wazirike. I didn't see much in preseason, and they just got him back, but to each their own. And then Jordan Jackson. And I even said this in the group chat. Who is that? I didn't know who that was. He was on the practice squad last year. Now he's on the 53, and he balled out in that last game. 2 sacks in the first quarter.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that this is your deepest unit. And of all the decisions, this was probably one of your hardest decisions that you really had to make, was that defensive line, because I was actually really impressed with the Wazirike for the amount that he was able to play, how well he played, and for being suspended for a full year, coming right into it, with the first preseason or second preseason game and playing about as well as he did and not kind of missing a hiccup, if you will, with that defensive line. It was really impressive. And Jordan Jackson, maybe the Broncos can luck out in getting Dondre Tillman, back on the practice squad, and maybe he gets activated. But it was really tough. And I think that once you saw Matt Henningsen be cut, once you saw Elijah Garcia be released, I think in specifically Angelo Blackson, once you saw Blackson be released, that's when you were starting to kind of maybe see an idea of where they really wanted to go with the defensive line. And maybe my biggest kudos is DJ Jones. We have to give a huge shout out to DJ Jones, because this is a guy that has been kind of in the doghouse, in terms of possibly like his play last year, and so he's in the final year of his deal, but he played exceptionally well. And so you really do have what feels like a little bit more of a athletic front, right? You have a bit of a more athletic front on the defensive line with a lot of these guys. So super, super excited about that defensive line, which is, of course, now led by the newcomer, JFM, the law firm of John Franklin Myers.
Okay, linebackers will go outside and inside both. I don't think there's really any surprises on outside linebacker. Jonah
No.
Ellis played really well in preseason,
Really well.
so kind of made sense. And then inside is Alex Singleton, Cody Barton, Justin Sternad. And here we go, Lavelle Bailey. Boom. No more Jonas Griffith. It's Bailey time.
Well, Griffith is expected to sign with the practice squad, or at least the Broncos do hope that they are. Again, to quote Mike Kliss, he's suggesting that the Broncos are looking elsewhere for inside linebacker help. So they are scanning the waiver wire, seeing what essential upgrades they could have there. That being said, I would be really disappointed if Lavelle Bailey ended up getting bounced off the team because, I mean, the guy he's doing great. He looks the part. My God. Like when he was running down that field, I mean, nobody was even getting close to him. That was just a spectacular pick six that exceeded 90 yards. I mean, that was just awesome. When you have a guy with that kind of stamina and that kind of athleticism, man, that's kind of scary not to have him out on the field.
23 years old. I think he's 20. I think he's turning 24. Like, I mean, you obviously, I'm not going to talk about the past. The past was the past. I mean, it was a really bad pass, but it's more about like what he did after that. And you do not find very many linebackers that do what he did, which is, take a pick six over 90 plus yards, like you said. And so that goes to show you the kind of athletic profile he really can present. And I would argue that play alone is what really sealed the deal for Jonas Griffith not being here. And of course, with Justin Sternad coming in and really forcing a fumble with a huge hit in the red zone. Sternad obviously is a big special teamer. So, I mean, you certainly wish, based on what we were hearing, right, with OTAs, Griffith being maybe the most athletic linebacker of the bunch. May not be the case when you get a chance to see what, Bailey was able to do. So I will actually shoot my shot here. And I will say this, I will say it's not out of the realm of possibility that starting alongside Alex Singleton is actually going to end up being Lavelle Bailey.
Well, that was going to be my next question. As you look down at the PUP, physically unable to perform list, you got inside linebacker Drew Sanders. When he's healthy and he comes back, whose spot is he taking?
Probably Sternad.
Okay.
The key is he's going to have to do some special teams for that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But he's been so forgettable this offseason. It's weird, as we were like kind of piecing together the roster yesterday. I was like, oh my gosh, I totally.
Oh yeah, Drew Sanders.
Sounds terrible as somebody who loves his team and follows his team very closely, but it's just like he's kind of an afterthought at the moment. But sounds like he's going to be available for quite a few games this year. So I agree with Cam. I think it's got to be a replacement for Sternad.
Or whoever else they decide to bring in.
The other one that's, if it's not Sternad, would end up being probably Cody Barton, depending on how Cody does.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't think there was any question that he was the other starter aside Singleton.
I think it could end. Me personally, I would go with Bailey, opposite of Singleton.
Okay. Moving into cornerbacks, PS2, Riley Moss, Levi Wallace, Jaquan McMillan, Tremont Smith, and Chris Abrams-Drain. Now, one of those spots was most definitely for Damari Mathis until he got hurt. Do we know what actually happened was it his ankle?
Yeah, I think it was an ankle, yeah. And they were able to get some good news on it. Doesn't appear to be serious. And maybe that's where you see the roster, shift a little bit with some of the. Maybe that's where you see a guy like Frank released and then brought into the practice squad a little bit. Maybe that's what you see in terms of some roster shifting and stuff like that. Or maybe that happens with the quarterback position. I don't know, but but I think that once Mathis is back, that's when you'll see some of that roster shifting. And I will say this, Mathis has been receiving a lot of heat, from Bronco fans, right, ourselves included, based on last year, but like with what we've been seeing in this preseason and training camp, he has played his butt off. Like he rightfully was cornerback 3, and vying for cornerback 3 with his performance. So I understand the complaints from, Bronco fans still with Damari Mathis and everything, but you have to give credit where credit is due with where he is and playing with a lot of, emergency, if you will, from that position. So kudos to him, and hopefully he can come back healthy.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like we're talking about Raheem Moore. Like he's getting better.
No.
He's getting better.
Right.
Safety.
Still too soon, by the way.
Still too soon. Safety. Brandon Jones, PJ Locke, Devon Key, J.L. Skinner, Keydron Smith. I don't think too many surprises there. I think that's pretty much what we expected.
Not initially, obviously, because none of us had Keydron Smith on our radar, or even Devon Key for that matter. But as the course of the, training campers going on, that's when we started to realize, they might actually carry 4. They might actually carry 5. I think what I really like about this in carrying 5 is it offers a lot of flexibility for maybe what they want to do with J.L. Skinner. I think that this is going to afford them really a lot of flexibility with, do they bring him into the box? Do they really use him in that, Jamal Adams role, which is the linebacker, pass rusher, if you will, that rover, type player. So they're going to really, I think, have a lot of flexibility now with, these 5 safeties. Or if Damari Mathis comes back, do they cut Keydron Smith? I don't know. So that's another thing certainly to be following, because, with it being 5 safeties.
Well, you see at the PUP, you see DTY down there, and looking at the safety room here, I can't picture him supplanting anybody presently listed as a safety in the 53 right now.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that he was already in, the roster bubble anyway, coming into the season. And I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, obviously, I don't know how it works with the PUP, but it would have to be some sort of injury settlement for them to come to, and, and then at that point they release him. He's still recovering from his ACL, and I would not be the least bit surprised if, and I'll say this with Drew Sanders too, I wouldn't be surprised if Sanders and or Delaren Turner-Yell don't even play any games this year, and it's just they start with the short-term IR, and then it goes to short-term to, full-time IR, for both of those guys.
Yep. And then getting into your special teams, you've got Will Lutz as the kicker. Great decision. Riley Dixon wins the punter battle, so he's on the team. And then your long snapper, Mitchell, shut your mouth, jabroni, there on the team as well.
Can you smell what the Rock is cooking?
Shut your mouth.
Oh, your role.
Oh, boy. So, yeah, that is the 53-man roster. Obviously, there'll be some changes. I mean, I don't think there's going to be any major changes. Like, we're not going to see a Cortland Sutton trade and somebody we're not going to see that. There's not going to be any craziness going on. But we might bring in some back-end players that can help out in rotation.
Well, I mean, I agree with you, but you can't count out at least the possibility of a quarterback trade.
Okay, so Bo Nix is not going to get traded. Let me just throw that out there.
Yeah.
We're not going to see that.
Right.
Bo Nix for Trevor Siemian.
I'm sure that there will be some teams, some desperate teams, that may be calling in regards, with Jarrett Stidham, Zach Wilson, getting kind of maybe some feels a little bit about, maybe the Vikings, get a chance.
Bradford, he's the next Hall of Famer.
Stidham could start for the Giants. He is right about that.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. I'm trying to think of any other teams that need quarterbacks.
Vikings.
Raiders.
Yeah, they're not getting Stidham. Sorry.
Maybe the Chargers. But you're not trading him in division.
I think that's it.
Yeah.
Well, Seahawks if Geno Smith sucks, but after week 1.
Maybe New England.
There's so many things coming out about Drake May being bad and Drake May being good. I don't know anymore whether he sucks or not.
It sounds
they
like
keep saying that like Joe Milton's going to start, but that's not going to happen.
It sounds like Drew Lock in Denver.
Right?
Yeah.
Except Drew Lock sucks and everybody can see it.
Gerard Mayo one day says that, but it is refreshing actually to have a Patriots coach that talks to the media, is respectful of like the people asking him questions, and doesn't just like, speak in circles to just
one word
check
answer.
The clock. Oh, it's so annoying. But he was saying like one day he was saying he's not the best quarterback on the roster, and the next day he's saying that he's the best quarterback on the roster. So
yeah. So yeah, I wouldn't. I don't know. I mean, we're just kind of speculating there, but yeah, I mean,
Steelers.
No, I think Steelers.
Yeah, they got Russell Wilson. They're fine.
They got Justin Fields at kickoff return. They're fine.
Crazy.
Panthers. Maybe Panthers if Bryce Young doesn't work out.
So looking at the roster, because we were going to talk about it, who are some players that were cut that you guys feel could return and be a part of the practice squad? Obviously, not counting Michael Burton or Little Jordan Humphrey, because it seems like things are trending that direction.
Jeff, I think that if you look at Milton, even in his Tennessee days, the Volunteer fans didn't like him because he was so erratic as a quarterback. What he is, though, is exciting, and the fact that the guy can probably throw the ball 100 yards, and he's very exciting to watch. I mean, it would be smart for them to put him in as certain plays. I don't want to say like gimmick plays, but like more gadget plays or something, where you're not relying on him to maybe he can be developed. The guy he is extremely exciting to watch with because he has a skill set that really nobody else has.
Yeah. What did they say with his draft analysis? It was he can hit the home run, but he can't hit the layup. That's
right.
kind of
that's the thing.
Yeah, and that's the thing with Joe. Yeah.
But players that I would like to see back, I would love to see Brandon Johnson back. I think that guy has a lot to offer. He's one of those guys so that he could be picked up for a 5th or 6th spot on an existing team roster. He's got talent. I mean, that was pretty evident on that bomb from Wilson the other day where he scored the touchdown. I mean, that was just a beautiful play all the way around, but especially on, at the hands of Brandon Johnson.
Yeah, the concentration there for that is, and Brandon Johnson's also a player where, just when you feel like he's counted out, he kind of finds his way a little bit back onto the Broncos. And so I think what's going to end up being interesting is, with guys like Brandon Johnson is, some of these guys, when they do sign with a practice squad or they sign with a new team, it's also maybe where they see a future. And maybe that's one of the reasons why Brandon has been so, reluctant to sign anywhere else, because he sees a future here in Denver. And maybe that's, and maybe that's just in conversations and stuff due to development and everything. And so, so just when you feel like, you're done with Brandon Johnson, he comes right back in, and he's back on the roster. I mean, I can't even, I can't even fathom the type of year that we had to deal with, when he had that was a leg injury or something or something. He had a pretty rough injury a couple years ago. The Broncos cut him, and all three of us were just hurt at the idea that they released, Brandon Johnson, and then lo and behold, he comes right back to the team like a couple days before week 1 or something like that, or like right at week 1 or something like. So it's doable. I mean, it's certainly doable.
Yeah, I was going to go with Calvin Throckmorton or Thomas Incoom. I kind of wish that either one of those two would come back.
I think Thomas Incoom that ship sailed.
I know. Doesn't mean I don't want him back. And Throckmorton. Why wouldn't I want to say that every Sunday?
It sounds like a Lord of the Rings name.
Right? Throckmorton.
Yeah. Or like what is it, like one of those
Mundungus Throckmorton.
The jersey alone is worth it.
You need
Not if they charge you by the letter.
Like Hartman Throckmorton. That's the name you want right there. Pow!
Just for that,
hyphenated.
Just for that, you need to get a custom Broncos jersey with somehow Mundungus Throckmorton on the jersey.
I would, but it would probably be like Throckmorton instead of Throckmorton.
Well,
that's how I roll.
Well, based on how Denver sports have gone, they misspelled Tulowitzki's name into, Tulowitzki. So, I wouldn't put it past it.
Yeah.
Well, let's look at some of the candidates here. Cam, you have some of your favorites. I know you were bummed about some of the guys that got cut.
Yeah.
Why don't you mention them and who you think? Seriously, and who you think maybe would be able to be brought back?
It's hard, but I'm really pushing for Dondrea Tillman. I want Dondrea Tillman back. I actually think Quentin Newsome has a chance to be brought back. He had a really, really solid game in that third preseason game. He broke up the 2-point conversion. He had a couple really good pass breakups in that third preseason game. Even Omar Brown. Omar Brown, I thought had a pretty good preseason game. He came in, had a few tackles, behind the line of scrimmage, and so I think that, those are some of the guys. Wouldn't be surprised, obviously, if, they went out and they brought Jonas Griffith back. The thing that is going to be curious for me is what will his market be? What will that kind of market be for a guy like Jonas? And especially given the fact that, they're looking, right. The Broncos are looking at inside linebackers. So maybe that door is at least initially closed for Jonas. And I think as far as, I will say, I think probably, looking at it, I really didn't have any overall surprises. I think if you're really to kind of expect things for maybe movement, it would be something that would be maybe wide receiver, given the fact that they have 5. From the wide receivers that were released today, or at least with on the market, or at least via trade value or something or trade candidates. There's some names out there that maybe worth kicking the tires on. I think what was it? The Texans released Noah Brown today, so that would be a name that I think would be really fun.
The Chiefs let Kadarius Toney go. There we
did.
go. And Montreal Washington.
They did. So, but as far as practice squad, I'm not overly, shocked. I will. Caleb Farley's another one, actually. Caleb Farley is another one. When you think about where this team is, young player, reclamation project, Caleb Farley actually fits the bill for that. Lewis Seen is probably another guy. He's a safety though, and they have 5 players so at safety. So maybe that's out of the cards. But Caleb Farley is definitely a player that I'd be interested in.
And it seemed like Quentin Newsome was one of the last cuts, or at least it was one of the last cuts that was confirmed. Yeah. So there may have been a lot of discussion about him getting a spot on the initial roster.
Yeah, I had that thought too, because it wasn't just Newsome, but I feel like as cuts were rolling in, as you get kind of closer to the cut period, it's usually when it gets hard, right? And so I feel like at that point you're kind of speculating maybe these guys are a bit likely to be brought back, to the practice squad. And actually Parker Gabriel, who people may not know this, he was a Husker beat reporter. And he was he was there for when Quentin Newsome was there. So it was kind of fun to see him break the Newsome thing. But he did mention in his little brief tweet there that it sounded like the Broncos were really wanting to bring him back for the practice squad.
Cool.
Royce Freeman got cut from the Cowboys. Sorry, I'm just going through the list.
He can thank Dalvin Cook for that.
Squirrel.
I'm just going through like old Broncos starters or people that are getting cut. That sucks for Montreal, Washington, though. I liked it.
Yeah. He was a good dude. I did see, looking kind of back at
PJ
this.
Mustipher.
What was it? Sam, right? Sam Mustipher was one of the cuts.
Yeah.
Caden Stearns.
Yeah, Caden Stearns, good old Caden Stearns.
He was cut?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, was it another
He got cut by the Eagles?
Was it another?
I don't know.
Yeah, KJ was cut too.
Yep. I'm not going to say that name.
I'm curious what they're going to do with Blake Watson. Like, I'm actually really.
I just noticed, Mike. I just noticed your name. It goes all the way across the screen.
Yeah, it's a long one.
Yeah, I just noticed that too.
Like the nameplate on the back of the jersey would have to have wings so I could open it to fit it all.
Good on the sleeves.
But I am kind of curious about Blake Watson. So what's interesting is, so Glenn, you were talking about the kickoff rule, right? Like, how some of the kickoff rule maybe had some influence. That might be where Blake Watson kind of got the nod. So I think we could look at a situation where Blake Watson is actually one of those guys that's not an initial, release right away, because, Watson could have a lot of value. Because, like, think of it this way: like, if you put Jaleel McLaughlin, just for whatever it's worth, Jaleel McLaughlin and Blake Watson on the kickoffs,
who do you cover?
Like, yeah. So I mean, like, you're talking about two speed demons, with the kickoff. So, like, I'm very, I'm kind of, curious with Watson. Did they just see it strictly from a kickoff return, value, which that is pretty brilliant at that point.
Well, here's another thought too. I'm just, he was previously a wide receiver. So with us only carrying 5 on the roster, and there's going to be a lot of movement on game day. This front office does a very good job with that. The game day rosters and the shuffling people around. But I mean, there's a chance that he could be lining up in some wide receiver sets because he has that experience and he's got that speed.
Which goes to the, Jaleel gets all the popular comparisons about Alvin Kamara, but like, that's one of the reasons why, ourselves felt like Blake Watson was the Kamara type, because he can line up at wide receiver. He can have, some of these stuff. So I'm very much looking forward to Watson, because, like, those types of players are game changers. Right? Like, those types of players are game changers specifically for he and Jaleel. So, like, I think for Watson, I felt like some fans were a bit harsher with him with the third preseason game. Like, they felt like he wasn't as impressive. For me, the run blocking was just horrendous when he was in the game. I mean, it didn't help matters at times when he was running the football, but, you can tell, like, he's got some quickness to him. He's clearly fast. You probably should have gotten into the touchdown there, but he fought 3 guys off, right? He fought 3 guys off, farming them at the goal line, which is, people realize, in the red zone, it's a shortened area. It's a shortened area in the red zone. And so, it's a bit harder to score there. And so he was just, close to getting into the end zone there.
Mike, I think this Jeff's comment is actually worth reading on that.
Yeah, well, and part of it is, so he says, can we talk about the masterful job Peyton has done with this roster, considering the Wilson cap issues? And next year we have $100+ million space. Didn't that go down to 80?
Doesn't matter. 80.
Well, and then there's still the extension of, I'm assuming Sutton's going to get one.
PS2.
Well, I know that one, but I'm saying I would assume Cortland Sutton's going to get one.
I don't know.
You don't think so?
No.
Garrett Bowles, yes, but not.
Okay. But then the other question is, how much of this was Peyton and how much of this was the other Peyton?
I think it was both.
I think they have a very collaborative relationship.
Yeah.
You know, it was just assumed that Sean was going to steamroll over George and perhaps get rid of him last year.
Mhm.
And I actually think that they care for each other. Like, you know, it's and maybe Sean realized, you know, that he's the big dog, but you know, in New Orleans, he had Mickey Loomis there the whole time. And it may be, as a coach, pretty lonely, you know, also being in charge of all that, the personnel, if you don't have somebody that you trust and somebody that's talented to lean on. And, you know, say what you want about George Payton. I think he's an excellent GM for the most part.
Yeah.
I mean, we all would have taken that Russell Wilson trade. We all would have signed him to the extension because that clearly was part of the deal in him waiving his no trade clause. I mean, it all would have happened. And the reason I know that is because we were all overly excited about it when it did happen, like unanimously. So
well, it's kind of like the situation with the Jets and Hassan Reddick, right? Like, you would assume that the Jets had to promise Reddick that we're going to redo your contract or get you an extension. Like, that's what's supposed to happen when you get traded to another team.
Right, but he hasn't received it yet. So I would say
that's what I'm saying, though. Like, you're expected to have a reworked contract or an extension when you're making a trade for a player of that caliber.
And so, like, for the Jets, like, this is pretty harsh without kind of knowing the full context of it, but it feels like malpractice from the Jets, because, like, if you make a trade like that specifically in the offseason, you know, you're not making a trade deadline deal for Hassan Reddick. You're doing an off-season deal where you could probably, and more often than not, work a deal out where you could do something with Hassan Reddick, right? And so I think that it just, to me, comes across with malpractice. Then as far as Sean Payton and George Payton, I think you really do have a really good working relationship. And I love the fact, Glenn, that you brought up Mickey Loomis, because I will bring up that point so often, and that was, they did not start out as the best of friends, Loomis and Payton, but over the course of the year and time with the Saints, Loomis and Payton became the best of friends, and they really started to understand the tendencies and the way that they operate, to where you really got a chance to see some of those draft classes, you know, really bear fruit, specifically the 2006 year, right? Specifically the 2006 year. And so now, you know, when you look at 2024 and even some of 2023, you're getting really good returns for a small draft picks that they had and have for 2023 and 2024. You're getting what appears to be good results right now for depth pieces, and really wanting to get finally getting a look at some of these young guys. You know, Riley Moss getting the chance to, you know, win that cornerback 2 job. J.L. Skinner getting that opportunity when what seemed like maybe had been a redshirt year. You know, Henningsen, you know, was obviously released. Disappointment there, you know, but I mean, like, you know, some of those other players, Drew Sanders, we'll kind of wait and see, but, you know, Devon Vele, early returns on Devon Vele is absolutely fantastic, you know? So, I mean, like, I think that the way things are shaping up is like you're looking at a far more cohesive relationship between the two of them. And frankly, I think that Sean needs a guy like George simply from the draft evaluation standpoint.
So this is how I see this whole thing playing out, right? Like last year, Peyton and Peyton were fighting each other. George Payton playing Sean Payton's drums. Sean Payton doesn't like it and buries him in the backyard. And then they both decide that Russell Wilson sucks, and then they just became best friends. That's how it worked.
Russ is always bringing people together. Like, he has that way of.
Maybe we should thank Russell Wilson for bringing George Payton and Sean Payton together.
What are you doing? Burying you alive.
But, you know, but I think that, you know, as we were even talking about Russell Wilson, it's worth, you know, bringing it up that George was the one who confronted Russ about the pay cut. It wasn't Sean. George was the one that confronted Russ about the pay cut, which, you know, we need to reinforce that, because George was the one who was here with ownership, who signed the contract and everything for Russ, the extension. So again, like it's admitting your fault and understanding, you know what, like I may have messed up here, Russ, we really feel like you need to take a pay cut. Can you please take a pay cut? The other stuff, who the he said, the he said, she said, kind of deal. We still maybe not,
He said, she said.
we may not know who was who was right in that kind of situation, but like, man, I'm very much, kind of pro Sean Payton and George Payton still.
Be careful though. It's spicy.
That was a layup there, as you guys can tell.
Yeah.
See,
Wiz, Headland, and Cam.
What's up, Mark? Thanks for popping in.
It's George's job. Yeah, true. But yeah, it's weird to me that there are still people that are upset that Russ isn't here. It does, like, you saw how he played with Pittsburgh. That's how he played with the Broncos. I don't understand why we still would want that. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. Well, and especially too, like statistically, Sean was still able to get the best out of that whole situation with, Russell Wilson. And I think that, I think it's going to be very curious to see how it all unfolds, because Sean Payton's career is attached to Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson's career is attached to, Sean Payton's. And so I think that, when you look at from the standpoint with their Hall of Fame careers, it's not looking good for Russell Wilson, unfortunately. And,
hey, no Tebow smack talk.
I think Russ has played himself out of the Hall of Fame. And it's really too bad. So you said, like, you think that George and Sean get along well. Like, do you think Elway and Peyton, Sean Payton are working together well now, since Elway still runs the personnel for the Broncos?
I think so. Yeah. No, of course, since he's the general manager still.
Yeah.
How often do we see that flare up online where people are screaming about John Elway and the decisions he's making?
Not as much.
And that's after he gets a call from Ellis on the phone.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, not as much. I'll say that.
Yeah. All right. So obviously we will cover this in another episode, probably next week before the game start. But seeing the 53-man roster the way that it is, are you predicting more wins, sticking with what you initially thought, or less wins than what you originally thought?
I'm sticking with what I have, which is their floor is 7-10, ceiling is 10-7. The coach just lifts everything up. And it really doesn't matter. And also too, I will say this again, the roster actually is not as bad as people give it, give the attention to. Yeah, the wide receiver, room is around 5. I doubt it's going to stay that way. Specifically from the standpoint of, little Jordan Humphrey is probably going to be, in that room. So you're probably talking about 6 there. So I just think that, 10-7 is probably your ceiling, and Sean Payton gets the best out of every single, player that's on that roster. So he's already worth, 2 to 3 wins, maybe even more, just from his coaching style. Right. And I would even argue he was far more accounted for with the wins, due to Russell Wilson last year. So, so I think the key for them this year, and I like how Jeff mentions this in terms of starting 4-1, they have to start fast. If they start fast, to quote Sean Payton, they're a young team and a young and dangerous team. If they start fast at 4-1, at that point, you're getting all the confidence in the world for a young team like that, and who knows what's going to happen after that.
So my question:
the confidence,
Jeff,
the swagger, the excitement from the fan base, the optimism, all of that. We were 8-9 last year, and easily could have been 9-8. I just cannot see this team going backwards. I'm going with 10-7 at the bare minimum. And again, like every year enter into this with a lot of optimism, the orange colored glasses that we joke about all the time. But there's just
Mine
a
are clear.
feeling that we have gotten all of the roadblocks out of the way. All of the things that were kind of holding us back a little bit have now been eliminated. We replaced the coach a year and a half ago. We've replaced the quarterback. We decided to select a guy in the top 15 to be our starter, a guy with tons of experience and who just seems to jive well with the play calling of our head coach. It seems like our trajectory is so good. And so I'm not worried about these young players. I mean, we've got a great coaching staff and we do have enough veteran leadership that I think we're going to be able to steer the ship. I look at the safety room and I do wish that Justin were still in there because I think that would have made it a massive difference. And for an $8 million a year contract, it just, to me, still makes no sense.
Yeah. So, Jeff, I wanted to ask real quick, who's the one that you think we're going to lose to in that 4-1? I said that there was, like, you could look at the schedule and see that there is a possibility of 8-0. To be fair,
there's always a possibility of them going 17-0.
I'm just saying. He says Jets. I think Jets are overrated, but that's fine. Okay, Cam, go ahead.
Well, I was gonna. So Chase brought up shades of the 2023 Texans.
Yeah.
The reason why that would happen, the reason why they could be the 2023 Texans is what you could see from Bo Nix. The early returns of what you see from Bo is far and away more than anything we could have really envisioned, and I think that basically Pro Football Focus we know has its joke moments for sure, but Bo Nix was voted the quarterback of the all preseason team, above Caleb Williams, above Jaden Daniels, above Drake May, obviously above J.J. McCarthy, and Michael Penix Jr. So, like, he was voted the quarterback, right, of that preseason team. So the early returns of it has been absolutely fantastic with Bo. And obviously, my thing is, and obviously we gave a record prediction, but if you're truthfully look at it from the evaluation of the team and the way it goes, like, they will go as far as the development of Bo Nix goes. If Bo Nix really proves to be the guy and truly, proves that he's going to be the guy with Sean and he's going to be an elite quarterback, this team will always, from here on out, challenge for 10 wins, 11 wins, 12 wins, 13 wins, and then we'll be right back where we need to be, which is challenging the Kansas City Chiefs, and all these other teams in the AFC for Super Bowls, which is exactly what, Sean Payton was brought in to do. So if Bo Nix proves to be that guy, that's really, at the end of the day, that is the most important factor here when evaluating the Denver Broncos for 2024.
Yeah. And I mean, when you look at the Broncos schedule, it doesn't start getting tough until you get to the Ravens in November. Like, all the games that are in here, there's issues with the team. I mean, we still have questions on the Steelers, but if you get the Russell Wilson that we saw last year, as long as we're up by 20 in the fourth, like, we'll be fine.
Yeah.
The Jets, we got to see how Aaron Rodgers is, but I honestly don't think that defense is that good. Like, they can say all they want, but they're overhyped every year.
Well, their best lineman is on the Broncos right now.
I'm just saying, to be fair, with Zach Wilson on the Jets, the defense didn't hold up very well. I'm just saying.
That you're certainly entitled to your opinion, but
Raiders don't really have a quarterback. Chargers are still the Chargers, and the Saints are Saints, I would say, are mid-level, like average. I wouldn't say that they're blowing out of the water yet. We're talking NFC South. So, I mean, there is, you can make an argument in these first 8 games that Denver could win them all. Not saying they will, but you could. And then you hit the Ravens.
Like
and then you have the Chiefs.
Like I said,
doesn't Herbert have a Liz Frank injury now too? I mean, that's one of those things that just, if that's the case, that's one of those things that just lingers. That's what kept Peyton Manning out a good chunk of the Super Bowl season when Brock Osweiler took over.
Ryan
So-
Clady too. I think that actually helped end his career too. Was the Liz Frank injury? Yeah, it's an unpredictable injury because it's like it lingers, and so I mean, obviously, you have to bring up the fact that Herbert is arguably the toughest quarterback in the NFL, but it's still the Liz Frank injury, and so those things are no joke, man, and those things linger and they're painful, and so I definitely am with you there, Glenn. Like, I mean, obviously the team's going to go as far as Justin Herbert, but like, if he's not playing games, you're going to talk about exactly the type of Harbaugh or not, you're going to be talking about exactly the situation they had themselves in, at the end of last year.
I mean, let's face it, Harbaugh ran for the hills when the walls were closing in on him in Michigan. So
yeah, and now Michigan's in all this trouble.
Which apparently there wasn't problems to begin with,
Oh,
right, Jim?
Of course not. Yeah. I mean, that guy wasn't standing on the sideline in disguise like for, scouting anything. But.
Yeah. But yeah, I think we'll definitely get more into I'm going to say now the episode before the season starts is probably going to be let's go through the list again.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like that's probably what it's going to be.
And prediction, like the game predictions. Yeah. And we love the chat participation. So that's one of those where you guys would love for you to jump in there too and throw your guesses in as well.
Well, we definitely know he's the starter for game 1. So yeah, I don't know. We'll see how it goes, but I think this is the most excited I've been since we made the trade for Russell Wilson and then got really disappointed. Like I was super excited, like Russell Wilson. Yeah, never mind. Yeah. Forget that. But yeah.
So, and I will say this, obviously the Seattle and we'll talk about the game, next week and everything and previewing it, but I will say this. I think that I don't know whether because we'll talk about it. I don't know whether or not the Broncos will win or not, but I will say, I think that the Bo Nix stuff of going into Seattle and playing a road game to begin your career is a bit overblown. Like Seattle is I think that, it's a really big stadium. It's it's one of the toughest stadiums to play in, but like we're talking about a guy who played in the SEC. He's played in, big games. He's played in, college football playoff type games his entire, career at Oregon. I mean, and let's also, mention he's from the Pacific Northwest, right? Like he's from the Pacific Northwest. So like he's accustomed, to that side of, of where that is. So I think they're making it, a little bit, too much out of it, obviously McDonald's going to be a really huge test, so I think that, I think it's going to be it's going to be a fun test, but I think they're making way too much out of it than they really are.
Yeah. All right. Anything else we need to cover? I don't think anybody else got cut.
At least that we know of.
Not that we know of.
I was just checking to see if there was anything new, and I did not see.
Yeah, I don't see anything.
I realized it was lighting up my face.
Yeah. So that is going to do it for us. Make sure you check out all the shows on the MHRT network. You've got Mainly Broncos with Cameron Parker. He usually covers everything and gets deep down into stuff that we don't because there's 4 of us and there's only 2 of them, so whatever. And then make sure you check out all the other shows. We got shows Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then the Neighborhood's coming back on Sunday for the first Broncos game. We're also partnering with the Orange and Blue Network. They have their own takes on things. Check them out as well. It's kind of a fun little thing. We got different personalities and different opinions on everything. So make sure you check out all the shows. We love Broncos country. We love the Broncos. I'm Mundungus Throckmorton alongside Glenn Hauser and Cameron Parker, and we will see you guys later. Peace.
Fast lane when I pass in the street, bag of money in the passenger seat. Tempo's been asking for me on the road from the west to the east. Way up, I might never come down.